The sky above Earth was calm that morning, but far beyond the blue curve of the atmosphere, something extraordinary was happening. A massive starship, silver and shining like a blade of light, slipped silently into orbit. It belonged to the Zathari Empire, one of the oldest civilizations in the known galaxy. Their ships were perfect, smooth, and flawless, just like their lives. Inside the command chamber of the starship, Princess Aerolin of Zathar stood near a large window that revealed the planet below. Her eyes, a shimmering violet, widened as she looked at Earth. She had seen hundreds of planets before, but none like this. Most worlds she knew were carefully balanced, their weather controlled by machines, their landscapes shaped by centuries of planning. Earth was wild, uneven, unpredictable. Oceans crashed against coasts, storms swirled in white spirals, deserts stretched across continents, and frozen poles glittered in the sunlight. "Is this normal?" she asked, almost whispering. Her attendant, a tall Zathari scientist named Varric, bowed slightly. "Yes, Highness. The humans live here under these extreme conditions. They have not yet tamed their planet. Their weather rages uncontrolled. Their lands shift and quake. Yet somehow they survive." Aerolin frowned. "Survive? In this chaos?" She turned back to the window, studying the fragile blue sphere. Her people had long abandoned such struggles. On Zathar, weather was nothing more than a memory. Machines kept every day comfortable. Food grew in perfect towers of glass. Illness was rare, and if it appeared, it was cured in moments. No Zathari child had ever felt hunger. No Zathari home had ever been swept away by a storm. For Aerolin, the idea of enduring such a wild world was difficult to understand. The ship's captain spoke. "Princess, we are cleared to begin the descent. The United Earth Council awaits your arrival in their capital city." Aerolin nodded. She straightened her silver ceremonial robe and lifted her chin. She was here to observe, to study humans for the Empire, and to decide whether they were worthy of an alliance. Her mother, the Empress, had little interest in humans, calling them primitive strugglers. But Aerolin had insisted on coming. Something about these humans intrigued her. Arrival on Earth. The ship descended through the atmosphere, flames flickering harmlessly against its protective shields. As it broke through the clouds, Aerolin saw cities below, vast clusters of steel and glass surrounded by rivers, forests, and fields. Unlike the uniform beauty of Zathar's cities, Earth's cities looked chaotic with different designs, different heights, and different colors. Yet somehow it all worked together like a great puzzle. When the ship landed, Aerolin was greeted by human representatives. The leader, a woman named Elena Morales, stepped forward and smiled warmly. "Princess Aerolin," Elena said. "Welcome to Earth." Aerolin studied her carefully. Elena's uniform was neat but simple, far less ornate than Zathari clothing. Still, there was confidence in her eyes and her handshake was firm. Aerolin noticed something else. Elena's skin carried marks, small scars, a faint burn, and lines of age. On Zathar, no one allowed such imperfections. But here, humans wore their marks openly as if they were proof of something. "I thank you for your welcome," Aerolin replied politely. "I have much to learn about your world." Elena nodded. "And we have much to show you." The first shock that very evening, a storm swept across the coastal region where Aerolin's delegation was staying. Dark clouds rolled overhead, winds howled, and rain lashed against the buildings. Aerolin stood by a window, staring in disbelief. "This would never be permitted on Zathar," she said aloud. Her attendant Varric adjusted the glowing tablet in his hand. "Our climate controls would prevent such destruction. The humans have no such systems." As the storm grew stronger, Aerolin expected panic, but instead she saw humans moving quickly and calmly. Emergency teams rushed into the streets wearing bright jackets. They carried ropes, stretchers, and supplies. Some ran into flooded houses to rescue families. Others guided children into shelters. One scene froze Aerolin's heart. A group of humans tied themselves together with ropes and pushed into the roaring floodwaters to save a trapped child. The water was cold and dangerous, and yet they did not stop. When they finally pulled the child to safety, soaked and shivering, the rescuers only laughed and hugged one another. Aerolin whispered, "They risked everything. For one life?" Varric looked just as stunned. "It seems so, Highness." Aerolin pressed her hand against the glass. She could not look away. These humans did not wait for perfect safety or rely on flawless systems. They faced danger directly and endured it together. Questions in the dark later that night after the storm passed, Aerolin asked Elena a question. "Why?" she said simply. Why what? Elena asked. Why do your people live like this? Why do you accept such storms, such chaos? Why not control your world as we do? Elena thought for a moment. Then she answered, because life isn't meant to be easy. We grow stronger through struggle. Every storm we survive reminds us of our strength. Every disaster we overcome teaches us to build better.
We endure, Princess.
That is what it means to be human. Erilyn fell silent. She had no response. The word endure echoed in her mind. Journey into the wild the next day, Erilyn accepted Elena's invitation to visit a coastal rescue base. There she met humans who had just returned from the storm. Their clothes were torn, their faces tired, but their spirits were high. They told stories of how they saved families, how they worked together, and how they would prepare for the next storm. Erilyn listened closely. She noticed their hands, scarred, calloused, and strong. Each mark was a story of survival. Do you not fear suffering? She asked one rescuer. The man smiled. Of course we do, but fear doesn't stop us. If we gave up every time life was hard, we'd never survive. What makes us human is that we don't quit. We keep going no matter what. Erilyn felt a strange warmth inside her chest. It was admiration, though she didn't recognize it at first. Reflection that night. Back aboard her ship, Erilyn stood once again by the window and looked down at Earth. She thought about the storm, the rescues, and the laughter of exhausted humans. Her own people avoided pain and hardship, yet here was a species that embraced it and grew from it. She turned to Varric. Do you think we have grown weak? Varric hesitated. Highness, our way of life is perfect. There is no suffering. Yes, Erilyn said softly, but perhaps perfection is not strength. The morning air was warm when Princess Erilyn stepped outside the human research outpost. The storm of the previous night had passed, leaving puddles on the ground and broken branches scattered across the roads. Yet to her surprise, the humans did not sit still to recover. They were already repairing roofs, clearing streets, and helping neighbors. It was as if hardship only gave them more energy. Elena Morales greeted her with a smile. Princess, today we begin our journey inland. We want to show you more than just our cities. We want you to see how humans endure in every kind of place. Erilyn raised an eyebrow. Endure? You mean suffer? Elena laughed softly. No, I mean live through challenges, face them, and still move forward. The princess followed Elena to a waiting vehicle. It was rugged with large wheels and dust-stained paint, not elegant at all compared to Zathari crafts, but it looked strong, as if it had seen many journeys. Into the desert, their convoy drove for hours, leaving behind green hills and busy towns. The land became dry, the air hotter. By midday, the horizon shimmered like molten glass. They had entered the desert. Erilyn felt the heat immediately. Even inside the vehicle, sweat gathered on her forehead. On Zathar, no one ever sweated. Climate controls made such discomfort impossible. She shifted uncomfortably, fanning herself with her hand. How do humans survive here? She asked almost in disbelief. The geologist sitting beside her, a cheerful man named Daniel, smiled. We adapt. We carry water, wear light clothes, and build shelters from what we have. The desert looks empty, but people have lived here for thousands of years. Erilyn shook her head. Thousands? Impossible, Daniel laughed. Wait until you meet them. Life in harshness. By evening, they reached a small desert settlement. Simple houses made of stone and clay stood against the sand, and solar panels glimmered in the fading sun. Children ran barefoot across the hot ground, their laughter filling the air. Women prepared meals over fires, and men returned from long journeys carrying tools and baskets of supplies. Erilyn was amazed. These people had no advanced machines, no perfect towers, no climate shields. Yet they looked proud, strong, and alive. She noticed the lines on their faces, carved by years of sun and wind. To her they looked weathered, but to themselves they looked experienced. That night she joined a group around a campfire. The flames flickered, casting warm light across smiling faces. One elder told a story about how his ancestors had crossed the desert with nothing but stars to guide them. Erilyn listened closely. The tale was not about perfection or ease, it was about survival, courage, and endurance. Finally, she asked, "Why stay here? Why not move to a softer land?" The elder's eyes glowed in the firelight. "Because this land tests us. It teaches us patience, strength, and unity. We do not just live in the desert, we endure it, and in doing so, it becomes part of us." Erilyn could not reply. She only felt that same strange warmth in her chest, the same feeling she had felt during the storm. The sandstorm. The next day, the group set out to explore a dry canyon. Erilyn wore protective clothes given by the humans, but she still felt the heavy heat pressing down on her. Sweat soaked her neck and back. She was unused to such discomfort and wanted badly to return to her cool ship. Suddenly, Daniel looked to the horizon and frowned. "Sandstorm!" he shouted. The wind rose quickly. Dark clouds of dust began racing toward them. Elena ordered everyone to gather. "Stay together. Cover your faces. Do not run off." Erilyn's heart pounded. She had read about storms, but this was different. Loud, fierce, alive. The humans tied scarves around their faces, shielding their mouths and eyes. One man gave Erilyn his own scarf without hesitation. The storm hit like a beast. Sand whipped against her skin, stinging like knives. The air grew so thick she could hardly breathe. She stumbled, coughing, but strong hands pulled her upright. Humans formed a circle around her, shielding her with their own bodies. "Stay low, princess," Daniel shouted through the roar. She clung to his arm, trembling. Hours seemed to pass before the storm finally began to fade. When it was over, everyone was covered in dust, coughing and tired. Yet the humans smiled. They laughed at each other's dirty faces, sharing water and jokes as if they had just won a game. Erilyn stared at them in shock. You could have died." "Why are you laughing?" One woman wiped her eyes. "Because we survived. And surviving always feels good." Erilyn felt her throat tighten. These people had shielded her, risked themselves, and yet they found joy afterward. She whispered to herself, "Humans truly endure." A lesson in struggle. That evening, as the group rested in a cave, Erilyn spoke to Elena. On Zathar, no one would face such danger. No one would risk their life against a storm. We would let machines handle it. Yet here your people go out themselves. Why? Elena sipped from a water flask before answering. Because machines cannot give meaning to life. Struggle gives meaning. Pain teaches us to value joy. Hardship teaches us to value peace. Without struggle, princess, we would not grow. Erilyn thought long and hard about those words. For the first time, she wondered if her own people had lost something important in their endless search for comfort. The shared meal before leaving the desert settlement. The humans prepared a meal in Erilyn's honor. It was simple, flat bread, roasted meat, and sweet dates. But the people shared it with joy, laughing and telling stories. Children climbed into their parents' laps and elders told tales of long journeys. Erilyn tasted the food and was surprised. It was rough compared to the perfect meals of Zathar, yet it carried flavor, history, and care. She found herself smiling. Daniel raised a toast. To survival, to endurance, and to our guest who has faced her first sandstorm. Everyone cheered and Erilyn laughed softly. For a moment she felt less like a princess and more like a fellow traveler. Reflection. Under the stars, that night Erilyn stepped outside the settlement. The desert stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars. She had never seen such a view on Zathar, where city lights and climate shields hid the night. Here the universe looked raw and infinite. She whispered, "How small we are, and yet how strong they are." Varric approached quietly. "Highness, do you still believe these humans are primitive?" Erilyn shook her head slowly. "No, they are not primitive. They are powerful, but not in the way we understand. They have something we lost long ago. They endure, and in that endurance they find strength greater than comfort." Varric studied her face, then said, "Perhaps this is why you came. To see with your own eyes what your mother cannot." Erilyn nodded. She knew he was right. The desert journey stayed in Princess Erilyn's thoughts long after she returned to the human capital. The images would not leave her mind. The villagers laughing after the sandstorm, the children running barefoot in the heat, the elder speaking proudly of endurance. For the first time in her life, she wondered if her people, the Zathari, were missing something vital. On Zathar, life was perfect. But perfection, she realized, might be empty. Back among humans, Elena Morales continued guiding the princess to different parts of Earth. 1 week later, they visited a training base where human soldiers prepared for missions. Erilyn watched with surprise as the soldiers carried heavy packs, crawled through mud, and climbed obstacles in pouring rain. She whispered to Varric, "Why do they train in such misery? They could simply use machines." Varric answered calmly. They say it prepares their bodies and minds for war. A soldier who has suffered in training will not break easily in battle. Arlen studied the humans closely. Their faces were strained, their arms trembled with exhaustion, yet none gave up. Some fell, but their comrades pulled them back to their feet. They shouted encouragement to each other, voices filled with fire. One commander noticed her watching and approached. He saluted politely. Princess, we train this way because the galaxy is not kind. If we are weak, we die. If we are strong, we live to protect our people. Hardship is our teacher. Arlen nodded slowly. His words felt heavy with truth. She realized that while her people avoided hardship, humans embraced it, shaping themselves like iron in fire. Children of Earth later, Elena took Arlen to a school. There, children played in the yard. Some climbed ropes, some chased balls, and some simply laughed in the sun. One little girl tripped and scraped her knee. Arlen gasped, ready to rush forward. But before she could, the girl stood up, wiped her tears, and kept playing. Her friends clapped and cheered, and the girl smiled bravely. Arlen asked Elena in confusion, "Why do you not prevent this? On Zathar, children are never hurt." "Every risk is removed," Elena smiled. "Because children must learn that falling is not the end. Pain teaches them courage. Struggle teaches them to rise again. If we protected them from every hardship, they would grow weak." Arlen looked at the children with new eyes. Each bruise, each scraped knee, each test and failure, they were all lessons in endurance. Even from such a young age, humans were shaped by struggle. Families rebuilding. A few days later, news came of an earthquake in a distant region. Elena invited Arlen to accompany the relief team. At first, the princess hesitated. On Zathar, disasters were rare, and when they happened, machines solved them instantly. But curiosity and a growing respect for humans pushed her to accept. When they arrived, Arlen was stunned. Buildings lay in ruins, dust filled the air, and families camped in makeshift shelters. The scene looked tragic, yet what shocked her most was not the destruction, but the people's spirit. Humans dug through rubble with bare hands, searching for survivors. Neighbors shared food and water, even if they had little themselves. Children comforted one another with songs. Arlen approached a woman whose home had collapsed. "You have lost everything," the princess said gently. "How can you still smile?" The woman, holding her child close, replied, "Because I am alive. My family is alive. We will build again. We always do." Arlen's throat tightened. She felt tears rise in her eyes, something rare for her kind. She whispered, "Always. You always build again." The report to the Empress back aboard her ship. Arlen finally composed her official report for her mother, the Empress of Zathar. She described the storms, the deserts, the training soldiers, the children, and the families who rebuilt after earthquakes. "Mother," she wrote, "humans endure hardships that would break us, yet they do not simply survive. They rise stronger after every trial. Their scars are not marks of shame, but symbols of courage. Where we hide from struggle, they embrace it. Where we seek perfection, they seek meaning. I believe their strength does not come from avoiding pain, but from enduring it." When the report was transmitted, the Empress's response came quickly. Her voice was sharp even through the distance of space. "Daughter, you are deceived by primitive romanticism. Endurance is only for the weak who cannot control their world. We are beyond such struggles. Do not confuse suffering with greatness." Arlen lowered her head. For the first time, she felt the deep divide between herself and her mother. Yet her heart told her the Empress was wrong. A cosmic crisis days later, urgent news arrived. A cosmic storm of radiation and magnetic waves was moving toward the Zathari homeworld. It threatened to overwhelm their climate systems and power grids. For a people who had lived in perfection for centuries, even a single failure could be catastrophic. Varric looked at Arlen nervously. "Highness, our systems may not endure such a storm. Without climate control, our people will panic. They do not know how to live without comfort." Arlen's mind raced. She remembered the humans in the hurricane, in the desert, in the earthquake ruins. They had no perfect systems, yet they survived. They endured. She turned to Elena. "Your people, could they help?" Elena's eyes widened. "Help the Zathari? Against a cosmic storm?" "Yes," Arlen said firmly. "Because you know what it means to live through chaos. My people do not." Humanity's response within days, a coalition of human engineers, pilots, and scientists prepared to travel to Zathar. Their ships were not as elegant as Zathari vessels, but they were built strong, ready to take punishment. Erilyn joined them, determined to prove to her mother that humans were more than primitive strugglers. During the long journey, she spoke with the human crew. They told her stories of past missions, of ships stranded in space, of explorers lost in icy planets, of colonies rebuilt after disaster. Every story carried the same theme. Endurance. One engineer, his hands scarred from old burns, told her, "Machines break, systems fail, but the human spirit keeps going. That's why we survive." Erilyn listened with quiet admiration. The revelation in her heart as Zathar grew closer. Erilyn stood at the window, staring at the shining world of her people. Yet for the first time, she did not see perfection. She saw fragility. She saw a society that had forgotten how to endure. She whispered to herself, "Without struggle, strength fades. Without pain, courage dies. Perhaps we are the weaker race after all." At that moment, she knew the truth. The humans had something the galaxy desperately needed. Not perfection, not comfort, but endurance. The starship fleet broke through the cloudy edge of the Zathari homeworld. Princess Erilyn stood at the wide window of her vessel, her heart heavy with worry. Below her, the world of her birth gleamed like a polished jewel. Perfect cities of glass and silver, endless gardens of green, calm skies shaped by machines. But the perfection was fragile. Warnings lit up the screens across the ship. The cosmic storm was closing in, waves of radiation and magnetic force sweeping across space like an invisible tide. Her attendant Varric bowed his head. "Highness, if the storm disables the climate systems, our people will not know what to do. They cannot endure chaos." Erilyn pressed her hands against the glass. She remembered humans laughing after storms, rebuilding after quakes, surviving deserts and fire. She whispered, "Then we must show them how to endure." Arrival of humanity. Human ships arrived one by one, bulky and battle-tested. Unlike the smooth Zathari vessels, these crafts carried scratches, patches, and welded scars from old missions. Yet they flew steady, built not for beauty but for survival. Captain Elena Morales stood tall at Erilyn's side. "Princess, we'll help your people, but you must prepare them. Endurance cannot be given, it must be chosen." Erilyn nodded firmly. "Then we shall teach them." Panic on the ground. When the fleet landed in the capital, chaos had already begun. Citizens rushed through streets, their eyes wide with fear. Lights flickered. The protective domes that kept weather perfect trembled against the growing storm. For generations, the Zathari had lived without hardship. And now, even the smallest taste of it shook them to the core. Erilyn's mother, the Empress, appeared on the main balcony of the palace. Her voice rang out, calm yet distant. "My people, remain in your homes. Trust the machines. They will protect us," but the machines were failing. Alarms wailed louder with every passing moment. Erilyn stepped forward, raising her voice so all could hear. "Do not hide. Come together. We will face this storm with strength as the humans do." The Empress turned to her in disbelief. "Strength? Through suffering? Nonsense. Our empire does not endure. We conquer nature with perfection." Erilyn's heart pounded, but she stood firm. "Mother, perfection cannot save us now. Only endurance can." The first test, the storm struck the outer domes first. Winds tore across fields, lightning shattered towers, and temperature controls began to collapse. Human engineers rushed forward with their equipment, setting up emergency shields and backup power. Erilyn watched in awe as they worked. Their clothes ripped in the wind, their faces stung with sand and rain, but they never stopped. Some fell, others rose to take their place. One Zathari engineer cried out, "We cannot continue. It is too dangerous." A human beside him grabbed his arm and shouted over the storm, "Danger is where we grow. Don't stop, push harder." The Zathari stared at him in shock, then trembling, picked up his tools again. For the first time, Zathari hands worked side by side with human hands, not in comfort, but in chaos. The collapse's night fell. Part of the energy grid failed completely. A great city dome shattered, leaving hundreds of citizens exposed to the storm. Fear spread like fire. People screamed, crying for the machines that no longer worked. Erilyn saw families huddled together, unable to act. She stepped into the rain, raising her arms. "My people," she shouted, "do not fear. Do not wait for perfection, it will not return.
Stand together.
Shield one another, endure. At first, silence. Then a mother gathered her children and ran with them toward shelter. Others followed. Soon groups formed, helping the elderly, protecting the young, moving through the storm not as helpless victims but as survivors. Erilyn felt pride swell in her chest. They were beginning to learn. Lessons in endurance. For days, the storm raged. Humans worked tirelessly, sleeping in shifts, repairing lines, carrying food, treating the injured. Erilyn joined them, her silver robe long since torn and dirt-stained. She carried water, lifted beams, and comforted frightened children. One night, as they rested briefly inside a damaged hall, Elena looked at her and smiled. "Princess, you are enduring now." Erilyn laughed softly, her voice hoarse. "I never knew how strong I could feel until I suffered beside your people." She thought of her mother, who still sat in her high chamber, refusing to step into the storm. Erilyn knew that the Empress could no longer lead with old beliefs. The time of false perfection was ending, the turning point. On the 5th day, the storm reached its peak. A massive power hub controlling half the planet's systems threatened to collapse. If it failed, millions would be left without light or protection. Human engineers volunteered to go. Erilyn stepped forward too. "I will go with you." Veyric grabbed her arm. "Highness, it is too dangerous." She shook her head. "Then it is the right place for me." Together they entered the storm. Winds roared like monsters, rain hammered down, lightning split the sky. The humans climbed towers, secured lines, and fused broken circuits with sparks flying across their faces. Erilyn held cables steady with trembling hands, her heart racing. At one point, the structure groaned and nearly fell. A human worker pushed Erilyn out of the way, taking the hit himself. Blood streaked his forehead, but he grinned through the pain. "Still standing," he said. Then he rose and kept working. Erilyn's chest burned with awe. She thought, this is what it means to endure. To stand even when you fall, to rise even when broken. At last, the hub roared back to life. Light spread across the land. The city cheered. For the first time in their history, the Zathari had survived not through perfection, but through endurance. The Empress's realization, when the storm finally ended, the skies cleared. The land was scarred, buildings damaged, but the people were alive. More importantly, they were changed. They had learned to work, to struggle, to endure. The Empress descended from her palace, her face pale and weary. She looked at her daughter with heavy eyes. "You were right, Erilyn. I believe perfection made us strong. But when it failed, we were lost. It was the humans who saved us." Erilyn bowed her head, her voice steady. "No, Mother. It was endurance that saved us. And endurance is what we must learn from this day on." The Empress turned to Elena Morales and the human team. "You have given us more than survival. You have given us a lesson we had forgotten. From this day forward, let there be alliance between Zathar and Earth. Together, perfection and endurance shall shape a future strong enough for any storm." A new dawn weeks later. As rebuilding continued, humans and Zathari worked side by side. Cities rose stronger than before, no longer built only for beauty but also for resilience. Children of both races played together, sharing stories of storms and laughter. Erilyn often walked among them, no longer just a princess in silver robes, but a leader who had endured. Wherever she went, her people looked at her differently, with respect, not just awe. One evening, she stood with Elena on a balcony, watching the sun sink across the horizon. The sky glowed red and gold. Elena asked quietly, "Do you understand now, Princess?" Erilyn smiled. "Yes, I understand. Humans do not fear hardship. They face it, they endure it, and they grow stronger. That is why they will always survive. And perhaps that is why the galaxy needs them." She turned to look once more at Earth, shining far away in the stars. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "Humans, you endure all year, and in your endurance you carry hope for us all."